I stood in the kitchen, my hands buried in the soapy water, scrubbing the last of the dishes from a long day of work. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of the TV from the living room and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. It was a small moment of peace, but I knew it wouldn't last long. "Sarah!" My husband Mark's voice cut through the silence, sharp and impatient. "Where's my dinner?" "I've been waiting for hours." I flinched at the sound of his voice. He never seemed to understand that I was busy, always demanding, always expecting me to be at his beck and call. "I'm finishing the dishes," I called back, trying to keep my voice calm. But I could feel my hands tighten around the dish sponge, a sign of the stress that had become a constant companion. "Don't you have anything better to do than to stand around washing dishes? Bring me my food now, Sarah." His voice grew louder, each word more accusatory. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Mark had always been like this. It used to bother me, but over the years, it became something I just dealt with, accepted. I turned to the stove and finished the last few touches on dinner, trying to keep my hands steady despite the trembling anger building inside me. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me. It was my mother-in-law, Evelyn. She stood in the doorway, watching me with her sharp eyes as I finished plating the food. "I hope that's not too spicy." "Mark doesn't like it spicy," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with criticism. I nodded, holding back the urge to snap at her. "I made it mild, don't worry." "You always say that, but it's never mild enough," she muttered under her breath. I caught her eye for a moment, and I could see the judgment in her gaze. The same judgment I had endured for years, ever since Mark and I had moved into her house after our wedding. Evelyn had always found ways to make me feel small. She didn't like how I did things, how I cooked, how I cleaned, even how I raised my children. It wasn't enough to her. Nothing was. But that's how it had always been since I married Mark. Never enough. Dinner was awkward, as always. Mark barely said anything except to complain about the food. Evelyn sat quietly, picking at her plate, never offering a word of praise. And me? I just sat there, trying to make the best of it. My 7-year-old son, Daniel, was the only light in this suffocating house, and even though his presence made things bearable, it didn't change the coldness that hung over us all. The days had blurred together. Each one felt the same. Me waking up to Mark's grumbling, working in the office from home, taking care of Daniel, doing the cleaning, the cooking, everything, while Mark and Evelyn did nothing. They sat back, enjoying the comfort of their home, their control over my life. My life, the one I had imagined with so much hope, had turned into a constant battle to prove I was enough, and it was never enough. I remember the first time I realized this wasn't the life I had imagined. Mark and I were only a few months married, and we had just moved into his mother's house. I had been so excited, thinking we would build a life together, but it didn't take long for me to see how much his mother ruled everything. Mark always took her side. He didn't see the subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways she manipulated every situation. "Sarah," Evelyn said one evening, her voice soft but laced with disdain, "you need to clean the bathroom. It's getting disgusting in there." I stared at her, unable to hide the frustration creeping into my voice. "I cleaned the bathroom yesterday." "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "It's filthy now. Get to it." And so I did. Even though it wasn't my turn, even though I had already done my chores for the day, I cleaned the bathroom. I did everything that was expected of me, no matter how exhausted I was. But there was no recognition, no appreciation, only demands. Over the next few years, things got worse. I had to juggle work and family while constantly being made to feel inadequate. I cooked and cleaned, never a word of gratitude. Mark's complaints became routine, and Evelyn's criticisms were constant. They both seemed to find ways to make me feel small and invisible. One evening, after I'd finished a long day of work, I sat on the couch, trying to relax. My son Daniel was in the living room, watching his favorite cartoon. Mark was in the kitchen, his back turned as he rummaged through the fridge. I tried to push away the feeling of resentment bubbling up inside me. Suddenly, Mark turned and looked at me. "Sarah, why do you always look so tired? You're not working, you know. You're just here doing housework all day." The words stung. He didn't understand. He never understood how much I did, how much I gave. "I'm tired because I've been doing everything for you and your mother," I muttered, barely above a whisper. "What did you say?" Mark's voice was suddenly sharp. "Don't talk back to me, woman." I bit my lip, holding back the tears that threatened to spill. The house had become a prison, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape it. I could never do enough to please them. I had sacrificed so much of myself, and yet I was never seen, never appreciated, just used. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had been here for 6 years, living in this suffocating silence. The constant tension, the demands, the harsh words. It had worn me down. I had hoped things would change, but they never did. I had hoped that maybe Mark would stand up for me, maybe he would see how unfair his mother was being. But no, he never did. I woke up the next morning, feeling more defeated than ever. Mark was already at the table reading the paper as if nothing had happened. I could hear Evelyn moving around in the kitchen, her sharp eyes darting between me and the dishes in the sink. "Sarah, get a move on," Mark said, looking up briefly. "You're wasting time. You've got work to do." I sighed, pushing myself up from the bed. I had work to do, all right, but it wasn't the kind of work I wanted, the kind of work that gave me joy. It was work that drained me, made me feel less than human. That afternoon, I went for a walk to clear my mind. The streets were quiet, the sun setting slowly behind the horizon. As I walked, I thought about everything. About Mark, about Evelyn, about how I had been treated. I thought about Daniel, and how much I wanted a better life for him. A life where he didn't have to see me be treated this way. I had reached a breaking point. I couldn't live like this anymore. I was tired of being controlled, of being belittled. I was tired of being invisible. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands shaking as I wrote a letter. It wasn't just a letter. It was my declaration of independence. I was done. Done living in fear, done feeling like I was nothing. I was going to stand up for myself, no matter what it took. Mark came into the kitchen a few minutes later, a confused look on his face. "What's this?" he asked, glancing at the letter on the table. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. But inside, I felt a surge of fear and relief. "I can't live like this anymore. I'm taking Daniel with me." Mark didn't say anything at first. His face twisted with anger, but I saw something else in his eyes. Fear. He didn't know what to do. For the first time, I felt in control. "You can't leave," he said, his voice almost pleading. "You can't take Daniel. I'll change." But I was already making my decision. I had been waiting for years for him to change, for Evelyn to change, but they never would. "No," I said firmly. "This is it. I'm done." And that was it. I left. I filed for divorce, I found a lawyer, and I began the long process of rebuilding my life. The days that followed were tense, filled with cold stares and hurtful comments. But I didn't let them get to me. I knew what I had to do. For me. For Daniel. The journey wasn't easy. But every step I took away from that toxic house made me feel stronger, more certain. I was no longer invisible. I was someone with power. And no one, not even Mark or Evelyn, could take that from me. It wasn't just about leaving them. It was about finding myself again. And for the first time in a long